So hello, everybody. Let me welcome you all to the last presentation of the webinar today. Quick introduction of myself. I'm Kurt Klinner. I'm working as a technical account manager at Atlassian. And today I will tell you a little bit about some Jira features we recently released and some features that are around the corner. I will walk you in the next 50 minutes through some enhancements that we did in one of these three areas named scale and performance, security and compliance, and user management and controls. So without any further ado, let's directly look what Atlassian did with Jira, with a focus on DC for sure, on scale and performance. Throughout the last years, instance sizes of our customers are constantly growing in terms number of users, but also projects and issues. While some years ago, the biggest instance that we did see had around about 4 million issues, we nowadays have customers running on data center with more than 11 million issues. And looking at the user tier itself, up to 100K of users also in DC. To keep up with the instance growth, but also to support admins in a better way, our development teams released some interesting features, I would say, since Jira 8.5. The first one that I would like to highlight is the so-called document-based index replication. Not sure if the admins in the call who have a data center in place, I'm pretty sure you faced the problem that your index was out of sync. Not all of the nodes had the same index information in place. So that was a little bit due to the fact that before version 8.12 of Jira, we did use the so-called replicated index operations table to replicate index changes across the whole cluster. The node that did the change actually added that change information to the database and modified in parallel his local Lucene indexing files. All other nodes of the clusters did poll the database every 5 seconds just to see, is there a change? Pulled the full set of change information and created also their local Lucene documents. The part of retrieving the information from the database and building that local Lucene document is the one that is the expensive and the heavy one. With the document-based replication approach, we use a cache replication mechanism. So the node that generates the change and also generates that Lucene document propagates that document to all of the other nodes in the cluster. Still, there will be some information persisted in the database, but all of the other nodes do not need to read the full change that from the database and create these local documents. Instead, they just apply the document that was handed over from their sender node to their local indexes. Another enhancement that is in the area of Jira indexing is related how Jira is queuing index threads. Before version 8.16, there was just a single queue for the communication between threads that were requesting updates to a given index and the threads responsible for really updating that index itself. This approach could cause some issues when you use background reindexing, for example. As background reindexing created a lot of index operations that went into the queue, they would conflict with index operations that have been triggered by user modifications like creating an issue or updating things. So in the end, the result was that user actions were seriously affected by asynchronous index tasks. And in the end, the worst case scenario was that your Jira was left in an inconsistent state. So not all of the information was reflected in the index itself. Also with version 8.16 that had been released, I think around about 3 weeks ago, there's a change that we have now different indexing queues in place. So there are 2 priority queues. One, the primary indexing queue, accepts only indexing requests created by user requests, so all HTTP threads, while the secondary indexing queue focuses on the rest. And only if the primary indexing queue is really empty, then the request from the secondary queue will be processed. So we ensure that interactions from the user end will not get impacted by any kind of background reindexing tasks. So that's a bit more on the technical side. If we focus more on, how do we improve the life of admins? I'm pretty sure all of the Jira admins who had to create custom fields in the past found it quite painful that you first create your custom field, you give it a name, you select the type. But if you want to configure the scope, so for which project or issue type the custom field is relevant, you had to go to the configuration of the custom field after you created it and do the modification there. Since version 8.14, this is more seamless. So once you create a custom field, you will have the select options for the projects and the issue types directly embedded. And it's not a huge list that you need to scroll through and mark several of these projects. It's auto-completion, and in the end, you will have it directly in your view. Also in the area of the custom fields, and we did see there are a lot of great tools from our vendors out there that support you on the journey, but some core information is also embedded now into Jira as a core product. So we now have an option to identify how custom fields are used and when they were last modified. So before version 8.16, you had to rely on having any kind of custom developed things, third-party apps, or you did create the database like shown below. With 8.16, we now have embedded into the custom field view the information, how many issues make use of that custom field and when was that custom field updated the last time. So this gives you an indication on, custom fields that are not used at all because no issues reference them, or a custom field that have a less usage. With that information, we are also able now to do a bulk cleanup or bulk delete of custom fields. So this is something that had really been directly embedded into the core product. So that was just a quick rush through some of the highlights in the performance and scale area. Over to security and compliance. With GDPR, the German Datenschutzgrundverordnung, which is a wonderful word in German, but also internal audits, almost all of the companies have a desire to get better insights on what is happening on the Jira instance. This, as well as the demand for better controls towards authentication, ended up in some of the features that I will briefly touch on. The first one that I would like to talk about is the advanced auditing feature in Jira. While we had in previous version always the opportunity to have auditing on the admin end, what kind of users have been created, what kind of changes have been done to user groups, we didn't have too much insights on what is really happening on the project level or with the issues itself. So there are some third-party solutions out there, or customers really started analyzing the access logs to get better insights what is happening on their instance. With the auditing feature now, we have that built into the core product. The advanced auditing comes with 3 different layers that can be configured. So we have a base layer, advanced layer, and full. The link that is also shared in the presentation will take you to the documentation where you exactly can see in which of these levels you will capture what kind of event. Another nice feature that is also available now is that we have an audit delegation. So in the past, you always had to reach out to your Jira admins to get some insights what was happening. Of course, there was a strong focus on admin-specific things, but now for project admins, for example, we also have the feature on the project level. So if you go to the project configuration, you will see the audit information there, and all the events that are relevant for that specific projects will be shown there. So we removed kind of a single point of contact on the admin end and distributed that feature to the project admins as well. Last but not least, as you can also see in the screenshot, we have embedded a user interface that can be used on an admin or on a project level to look what kind of events have been captured, as well as to filter for specific events that you might be interested in. Dependent on the amount of entries, and if you use the full auditing features or the full set of information that can be captured, that can be quite enormous depending on the traffic on your instance, then it might be a good idea just to forward that information to your favorite log management tooling like Splunk or the Elkstick, something like that. All the information is persisted in files, so you can process it according to your needs. Personal access tokens. So I think that was one of the longest outstanding requests, as far as I remember. With embedding personal access tokens into the core product, like we already had them available for Bitbucket and Bamboo, we provide a secure way to use scripts and integrate external applications without the need of specifying username and password. So it's a token-based approach. Enabling Jira to have that feature was just the first step in the end of getting rid of basic authentication. The second step that also had been released with version 8.16 is that, for example, for the REST API, you are now able to disable the basic authentication. And in combination with the personal access tokens, have a more secure way that your end users can use to access and use the REST API. Last but not least, a quick view on some features in the area of user management and control. With the pandemic out there, we see that collaboration is one of the hot topics. The companies are growing quite a lot, but with the increase of users, also the requirements towards user management are increasing as well. So let me quickly show you some of the enhancements in this area. For quite a long time, SAML was the only supported identity layer for Jira thinking of SSO. Most recently, finally, we did come up with the support of OpenID Connect, also as an identity layer for a single sign-on in Jira DC. Just-in-time user provisioning for single sign-on setups is now also in place. Without having the just-in-time provisioning active, if you log in through SSO and the user is not present in one of the used user directories, regardless if it's the internal one or an LDAP one, the access will fail. With JIT enabled, users can be created just in time, as the name says, which allows kind of an instant login without the need of any admin to create them manually in one of the user directories. The data required to provision the user comes from the single sign-on response after the user is authenticated. And of course, you will need to do some configurations to map the attributes of the single sign-on response to map to the username, email address, and things of your user. Users that are gets created over the just-in-time provisioning are part of the internal directories of the application. And as mentioned, the configuration, it's pretty straightforward, but you will need to map some of the attributes to the user attributes in Jira. And last but not least on that one, as we see that nowadays the setups are more complex for companies out there. So, there are company mergers, internal restructuring, and so on and so forth. And quite often there's not only one single point of truth when it comes to user directories and identity provisioning. We finally did come up with a support for multiple identity providers in Jira DC as well. So also with version 8.16, we are now capable of using multiple identity providers together with Jira. So that was just a quick rush through some of the features. All of them, or all of the things that I just showed here, for that, there's one single point of truth out there. And I'm not sure if you're aware, Atlassian now has public available roadmaps for the cloud products, as well as for the data center products. So via atlassian.com/roadmap/data center, you have access to the latest roadmap updates for all of our products, regardless if it's Jira, Confluence, Bitbucket, Bamboo, whatsoever. And if you replace the data center for cloud, you will have the same for a cloud roadmap. As we have some interesting initiatives ongoing out there, and just to name some of them, like official support for Kubernetes deployments, improved hybrid deployment. So you have instances in the cloud running on our cloud offering, as well as things on-prem. So there will be a different approach on how to get these connected, taking into account that the network setup on the client side is not as easy as we expected in the past. And last but not least as well, Jira Software version 9 is on its way. So I would strongly suggest keep an eye on the roadmap because a lot of interesting things all around Jira are upcoming. With this having said, thanks for joining, sharing some time with us.